Alright, let's talk taking your tradesman exam in the state of Virginia. So, what I have pulled up here is if you go to Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever and you type in Virginia DPOR, you are going to come up with DPOR for Virginia. The Department of Professional and Occupational Regulations is who is responsible for issuing your tradesman license. So once you've completed apprenticeship and you've got the requisite experience, we'll talk about that when we get into tradesman regulations. But once you have the requisite experience to be able to take your exam, you're going to need to go to DPOR and get the information you need to do it. Now, if you're in my HVAC 4 class, I've got all this uploaded for you already for the most part, but there are some other things that you may need. So, if you search that, go into DPOR, dpor.virginia.gov. Go on down to professions and occupations and pick anything that says tradesman. But if you're a plumber or an HVAC tech or whatever, you can find that. You have plumber here, you have HVAC down here, but anything that has the parentheses around tradesman is going to get you where you need to go. And this is going to have mostly everything you need to know in it, minus a couple things which we're going to get to. But if you're getting a new license, applying for a new license, you have that section here. Here's the tradesman exam and license application. You will need that, and we can click on that real quick. That looks like this. They have a static form, and we're going to go over these forms, and then they have an interactive form that you can fill out if you've got Adobe in there, but I don't use Adobe as my PDF viewer, so it gives me that. But if you have Adobe Reader and that's what normally opens up forms in your browser, then that'll give you one you can sign out and save and print online. But otherwise, you can download the static form and work with that, either print it out or fill it out. The other thing you'll need is the individual experience verification form, and that looks like this. Oh, that's the interactive one, sorry. You got that static form right there, and you'll need to fill this out, which we're going to go over. Those are basically the only two forms you need, and we'll talk about other things you may want to attach to that form as we go over the tradesman and exam license application. But those are really the two main forms that you need to do and send in. You'll have to send that in with your payment and go from there. Then if you're going to play with your credit card, if you go to the bottom, you have other forms. You'll have a credit card payment form if you need to do that. It used to have two places to sign: cardholder signature. No, they don't have it anymore. It used to be that you had to sign in two places, and when I took my exam, I actually got this form kicked back to me because I didn't sign in both spots. But they fixed that. Thank you. I'm sure they had a million people that forgot to sign in two spots. Um, and then if you have any disciplinary action from DPOR or any other jurisdiction, if you got disciplinary action in another state based on licensing, that specifically trades licensing, you will need to pull up this form and do it. And then if you have any criminal convictions, that's misdemeanors or felonies, both of them, you will have to do a criminal conviction reporting form. You don't need to do it for traffic convictions, okay? It's not going to be necessary for traffic violations, but anything that's classified as a misdemeanor or a felony in the state of Virginia, you'll also have to attach that form. In general, I wouldn't worry, about whatever you have. It's better to report it than to not, because then you're lying on an application basically. But in general, there's going to be very few cases in which your criminal convictions are going to keep you from getting a license, but it is possible they can reject you for a criminal conviction, so you'll want to report that. So this is where you get the forms that we're going to go over. This is where you get information from DPOR. Now the other thing that you get here that's important is if you click on laws and regulations, then tradesman regulations are here in a PDF. You will need those. Contractor regulations are here in a PDF. I recommend those. There's not too many questions on the actual tradesman exam that involve contractor regulations, but you do want to understand contractor regulations as a tradesman, so I highly recommend that you have that form, that booklet available. The tradesman regulations, though, you will need to print out and take with you to your exam. You will have approximately 10 questions on tradesman regulations out of your exam. So you want to have this form printed. You want to have this PDF printed out, and you want to have it stapled or put into a binder. So print that and take that with you to your exam. If you need education, continuing education or something like that, you can go into education and exams and find information on that. They have approved tradesman schools if you're not already enrolled in a apprenticeship program and you're in the state of Virginia. And then they have continuing education courses, which you'll have to do on a regular basis, which we'll talk about when we get to tradesman regulations. Then here is the candidate information bulletin. Now, I usually search this a different way. We're going to talk about it. Here's tradesmen, backflow prevention device workers, and this is water well systems. But there is a candidate information bulletin under tradesmen here, and that's where you get to this, which is what I want to talk about before we talk about the forms real quick. So the other way to get this is to search Google and do PSI Virginia Tradesman Candidate Information Bulletin, which is usually how I hunt it down, but they do have it on Virginia's website as well. So before we get into the forms and stuff, because that's going to be pretty straightforward, point to point to point, let's take a quick detour and talk about this candidate information bulletin. So this is good information to have. The test is administered through PSI. So after you get approved for your exam, you will go to PSI and create an account, and you'll put all your information into that, and they will be able to tell that you've been approved for the exam through DPOR. You've done all the forms and everything's been approved. And then you register for your test, you pay a fee, and then you take your test. So these are the people that actually administer the test for the state of Virginia. DPOR just handles all the licensing and everything. So this candidate information bulletin gives you important information about taking your exam, what you can have with you, and all the rules regarding all those things. So again, this applies to journeyman HVAC, master HVAC, gas fitters, plumbers, so on and so forth. So if you look through this, it tells you where you can go to questions. It gives you a link to the same website on DPOR that lets you apply for your exam, tells you where you need to send it to. All this information is on DPOR too, but it's a nice quick reference right here. And then it tells you the reference materials you can bring. Alright, so the following list is possible reference materials for the license and certification examinations. Alright, all examinations are open book. You must bring your own references, none are provided at the site, and no study guides are permitted. So basically, as we go through this stuff, you need to understand that they don't let you bring anything but these reference materials, basically. So when they say this is possible reference materials, this is really the reference materials you want to bring if you have access to all of them. If you don't have access to all of them, bring all the ones you do have. Okay? No loose papers or unbound references are permitted for the exam. If you download a reference from the internet, it must be spiral bound or hole punched and placed in a binder or stapled in the top left hand corner. References may be highlighted, underlined, or indexed prior to the exam. You cannot do this while taking the exam. You cannot highlight something while taking the exam, but you may highlight them, underline them, or index it before them. You cannot contain any writing in the exam. The only thing they'll let you get by with generally is your name. Printed on the book, but even that is technically allowed, I believe. I don't even think they give you that exception, but usually they will allow you to just have your name written in it, but absolutely nothing else. So you cannot write anything in the exam. You cannot write anything in your reference materials during the exam. They don't want you taking notes on what's in the exam, basically. So you can highlight them, underline them, or index them. You cannot write in them, and that can only be done before the exam. The references may be tabbed with permanent tabs only. No removable tabs are allowed. So you can't put any tabs onto the book that you can take off later, because you can use that to index where certain questions were in the exam or something when you come back and take it if you happen to fail. So any tabs have to be permanent. The following list of tabs may be used. They may be purchased at local office supply stores. So you may use Avery Swift tabs, permanent plastic tabs, or Ready Tag self-tip stick permanent adhesive index tabs. For your code books, they will generally accept the actual tabs that you can buy from the International Code Council that mark the separate chapters in the book. There are places where you can get those. If you guys want me to help you find those, I can, but in general, only really thing it does is mark each individual chapter, and I don't find that particularly helpful myself. But the Code Council do sell tabs to mark the individual chapters in your paperback books or something like that. Unacceptable tabs are post-it index flags or post-it flags because they are removable. The URL listed for each of the references that we're going to look at is generated from most recent searches. However, you may have trouble finding them based on the links in this, but usually these links work. We'll go through and see if they work right now just to be safe. But if you have trouble finding any of those references, just search them on Google, or if you still have trouble finding them, shoot me an email or a comment or something, and I will help you hunt it down. It's not that hard to find most of these. Alright, the most important thing right out of the gate is what I just stated, those tradesman regulations that we've already looked at. You want these tradesman regulations printed, and you want them with you. There's nowhere really to buy this as a book. You just print it out and bring it with you. So you need this for all tradesman examinations. You need the individual license certification and regulations, which we'll go over in another video. But you definitely want to bring that with you. For HVAC, we're specifically talking HVAC right now. These are the books that you want to bring with you besides the tradesman regulations. So Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning, the 19th or 20th edition. This is not the book that you use for school. If you go to Fairfax County Public Schools ACE program, we get Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Technology. We do not get Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning. I will tell you that when I've taken the exam, there's a total of maybe 3 questions out of this book. Okay, there's not a lot of questions out of the Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning book. I would not be too concerned about having one with you, but if you have access to it or want to buy one, it is very similar to Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Technology. They're practically the same book the last time I compared 2 editions. They're just organized way different, but a lot of the same information is in both of them. They may let you bring your Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Technology book in, but don't count on it, and don't count on the answers being from that book because it's not a certified reference. So that's up to you whether or not you want to see if they'll let you bring it in. A lot of times they'll be lenient on references as long as they're official references, basically, as long as they're official textbooks and not study guides. But don't count on it. That's the book that you should bring if you want questions out of that book. But again, you're not going to have too many questions out of it. The big one, The big one is the International Mechanical Code 2015. You want the Virginia Mechanical Code or the International Mechanical Code 2015 with you. Now, this year may change by the time you take your exam. We may be to 2018, but I don't think so. I don't think they're going to adopt 2018 this year, but I'm not sure. But within the next year or two, they'll adopt 2018, and you'll need that. And then within a couple years after that, we usually, about every 3 years, we adopt the new code. So we're usually 3 to 4 years behind on adopting a new code. So 2018 was about 3 years ago, so we're getting there, but I imagine that's a little bit slow this year. So if you've got a newer one, so you don't have 2015, you have 2018 or 2020 or whatever the newest one is, then you can bring it with you. They will generally accept it because it's a newer version of the same reference, but some questions may be different. Some things that change between the code years may end up have changed in your test is based on the older version. That is going to be pretty unlikely, but it's possible. So just understand you may miss another couple questions basically if you have a different one, but me personally, it wouldn't concern me too much. Just bring whatever international mechanical code you have, but if you want to be a stickler for having the right book, then it is currently 2015. The last one is NFPA 31 standard for the installation of oil burning equipment. Again, there is information on oil burning equipment in your International Mechanical Code. So the questions that come out of NFPA are only a few because there's only so many questions on oil burning equipment, and they ask a few out of the mechanical code. There's not many that you can only specifically find in NFPA 31. We will not be covering NFPA 31 at least for the foreseeable future. So it'll be a long time before I bother putting a video up on NFPA 31. I did take it with me to my exam, and I think I found a grand total of 1 or 2 questions out of it when I took my exam. So it's not, it's another book I wouldn't be too concerned about bringing. Really, the majority of your questions are going to be out of your tradesman regulations and out of your International Mechanical Code. So it is not extremely important that you worry about these other two. But if you want to be a little bit more certain on getting a lot of questions right, you can bring and study those 2 other books. NFPA 31 isn't much harder than studying any other code, and the principles that we'll talk about in looking through the International Mechanical Code, you can use those same principles to get a good idea of what they might ask out of NFPA 31. Modern refrigeration and air conditioning, you're probably not going to study that whole book, right? But hopefully you've read a reasonable amount of air conditioning and refrigeration technology, so you'll understand the kind of stuff that's in there. But for that book, if you're going to take it, obviously your index is your friend. You know, if you find a question that is obviously not out of the code or NFPA 31, it's a general question on like a compressor or a TXV or something like that, then you'll want to try and find where those items are in the book and see if you can hunt down the answer in a reasonable amount of time. And those are the 4 references you should have with you, 2 of which are extremely important. The other 2 are, in my mind, optional, but that's entirely up to your discretion. If you continue looking through here, we can go down and look at the journeyman or master HVAC portion of the exam. All right, this gives you an idea of how many questions are and how many items you have and how long you have to take the exam. So the journeyman and master exam are the same. The biggest difference is a journeyman requires a passing score of 60, a master requires a passing score of 64. So you have to get what is that, 60 divided by 85, that is, you have to get 70%. You have to get a 70% to get a journeyman's, and 64 divided by 85, you have to get a 75. So you have to get a 70% to get your journeyman's exam. You have to get a 75% to get your master. You will have 210 minutes to take your exam. So that gives you, let's go ahead and double check my math here, because if I recall, 210 divided by 85, that gives you about 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes per question. All right, you have 2.5 minutes to answer every question on the exam and get it right. That means you want to answer as many questions as you can as quickly as possible. But when you're answering the questions, you want to find the actual answer. So the types of questions that are in the exam are A through F is out of your tradesman regulations. So 10 questions are out of the tradesman regulations. There's 3 on standards of practice, 2 on standards of conduct, 2 on renewal and reinstatement, 1 on definitions, 1 on qualifications for licensure, and 1 for revocation of licensure. So those are the kinds of questions you're going to get out of your tradesman regulations. The rest of these are almost all basically out of your code book. Okay? So you want to be able to find all of these questions as quickly as possible in their respective books. And again, having about 2.5 minutes per question. So the idea is to understand these books well enough that you can quickly find a question on duct systems, right? There's a whole chapter in your book on ducts. So the odds are these 6 questions on duct systems are going to be in that specific chapter. And over the course of the next few classes, quite a few classes, we will go over all of those questions, what those questions are usually about, so that you can highlight your book or get a good feel for where these questions come from and be able to find those sections that are most likely going to have an answer to your question very quickly. So the idea is to be able to take 2.5 minutes, find a question, verify that you're correct, and answer it. I highly recommend that you try to find every answer, especially if you're pretty quick at doing it. If you can't find every answer, but you're pretty confident you have the right answer on a question, you can just mark it. But there's really no excuse to not just find every single answer and make sure you're correct the best you can for all the questions. And if you can do that for at least 70 to 75% of the questions, you're good to go. The idea is if you see a question, you have no idea where the answer is, or you see a question and you try for about a minute and a half and you can't find the answer, skip it and go to the next one and just find all the easiest questions first, and then you can go back when you're done at the end and go through all your skipped questions and then work on those individually until your time's up. So you should take the time to find as many answers as you can, answer those as quickly as possible, skip ones that take a long time, then go back and do those. If you use that strategy, it should be relatively easy for you to get through this exam. I mean, it is not that hard. It really isn't. As long as you're good at reading a book or good at finding the answers based on what we talk about, then you should be good to go. There are questions that require math, those being involving ventilation systems. Okay, so these 8 items on ventilation, you will have to do calculations. We will talk about how to do those calculations so you're prepared, but those are the only questions, and it's not even all 8 of them, but those are the only questions where you actually have to do some kind of math. But hopefully by the time we're done, those are easy questions for you too. It's not very complicated math. It shouldn't take you too long to bust out those equations, and then you move on to everything, and then you handle everything else as it comes. Everything else is basically like find the keyword in the code book. But we will give you some example questions to go over so that you have an idea of what you're looking at. And that's the majority of the pertinent information in this booklet. There are other things about the exam accommodations and getting there and all that nice neat stuff. You'll want to look over that. It tells you how the questions are lined up. They're all multiple choice. You got 4 possible answers, and then you pick one of the 4 possible answers, and it goes over through all that stuff in here. But those are the most important things that you need to know. So in HVAC, you have to have 64 correct, like we already said. It tells you how many of the answers you have to have correct on each one. So, there's a registration form here, but really you're going to want to do this registration online. You're not going to want to do this on that form in the back. So, that is the PSI Candidate Information Bulletin. I would highly recommend you look over it and understand it yourself, but that is the most pertinent information in that. Again, once you've qualified your exam, you'll need to go to PSI's website and log on to it. And there's information in that on how to do that as well. If you have any troubles with that, let me know. But really, you don't want to do that until you've qualified for your exam anyway. Now, with that being done, let's go back. Let's actually go to the forms and look at those so that you understand some of the basic requirements that you're going to need before we talk about tradesman regulations next. That'll be the next video. I'll make that a separate one. So let me switch over here and let's look at the license application first. Here we go. Alright, so this is the license application that you're going to need to fill out. This license application fee is separate than your testing fee. Basically, you want to set aside about $250 to $300 to actually apply for your tradesman's license. Okay, that's about how much it's going to cost you, and then every few years you're going to have to pay, or every 3 years? Hopefully I'm remembering that right. We'll know when we go through tradesman regulations. I'm drawing a blank right now. Every 2 or 3 years you're going to have to renew it. I know DC is every 2, and I forget what Virginia is right now. But every 2 years, I think, you have to renew the license. You get a little letter telling you have to renew, and again, when we go through tradesman regulations, we'll talk about all that anyway, so you should be an expert on that by the time we're done and not be drawing a blank like me. But this is the form you'll have to fill out to apply for your exam. You will want to where is it at? You will be doing HVA, Master or Journeyman HVA. Actually, it'd probably be Journeyman for most of you guys, so let's highlight that. You'll want to go to Journeyman HVAC if you qualify for the Journeymans. If you qualify for the Masters, you'll want to do the Masters. If you have 10 years of experience, you can go straight for your Masters and you're good to go. Otherwise, you have to take your Journeymans, hold it for a year, and then you can get your Masters. So you'll want to check the box that says an examination. The fee for that is $130. If you're from out of state, you would do reciprocity. If you're in an apprenticeship program, you can put that. So that would actually be most of you, right? Apprenticeship program. But you'll still have to do the exam based on the apprenticeship. You still have to take the exam even if you finished an apprenticeship program. All right, but this just tells them you've already done an apprenticeship program. You may want to double check that. I always forget some of the I don't think it matters. They still should put you in the right spot. I think there's some apprenticeship programs that give you a waiver for an exam, but my understanding is ACE is not one of them. I've never had a student come back and tell me that they didn't have to take the exam. Fairfax's ACE program does not give you the ability to waive this examination, but I think there are some programs that do. But either way, if you check exam or you check apprenticeship, you should be good. But I always checked exam. Alright, you will need to, if you have a license, you need to fill out your license number. Most of you will not already have a license, so this will be irrelevant. This will not be applicable. Put your full legal name. You need to provide a copy of a government and issued ID, so that needs to be attached with this form. You want to photocopy your license or whatever you have, passport, and attach it with this form. Alright, so one required attachment is a copy of a government issued ID. Then you need to give either your social security number or your DMV control number that's on your license. You have to fill out one of those and provide that. You'll need to give your date of birth and provide any maiden or former names you have. You need to give you a mailing address. You need to give a street address. So you can have a mailing address that is separate from your street address, but either way, you have to provide a physical address. So make sure if these are different, you give them both. If not, if your street address is the same as your mailing address listed above, then you can check this form right here. Check that box and you'll be good. Give them some contact numbers and email address. You'll want to give them an email address because you can do most of this stuff online after everything's done. When you get a license, I don't think their system allows you to apply for a license online yet, but if it's probably coming, so you may want to go on DPOR's website and see if there's somewhere. If you call them, if you go back to DPOR's website and you go to contact, telephone or an email directory, let me look real quick and make sure I'm not lying to you. Telephone and email directory. Licensing is boards. And then see if we can find this real quick. I'm just muddling through DPOR's website real quick. So let's look. Licensing section for tradesmen is right here. Alright. So you can 804-367-8511. You can call the licensing section. They usually answer the phone really fast and are really helpful over there. I've never had issues getting information from them or asking questions. So if you have questions or you want to know if they can do anything online, apply for a license or anything like that, you can give them a call and find out. But as I'm aware right now, none of this stuff can be done online. You still have to do the initial license by mail, and then you can renew it all by email. So back to the form, you'll need to give them that information. Contact employer's name. You have to give them your employer. You will have to have been employed for at least 4 years in a company that holds a Virginia contractor's license. If you have not been working for a company that holds a Virginia contractor's license, you will not be eligible for your exam, and that can be an issue. Now, they will, I believe, make exceptions as long as you're working under a master tradesman. So if you say work for Fairfax County Public Schools and there is a master licensed technician in your department, then you should be able to use their information and maybe still get your license, but you will want to discuss that with DPOR and figure that out. If anybody wants to post any comments on their experience with that, I've had some feedback from students over the years, but I know that the guys from Fairfax County Public Schools that take this class have the biggest issues qualifying for their license. They got the hardest time. But as long as you work for a Virginia contractor, you are good there. You'll have to put in their license number, their name, their address, and that will help along with your individual experience verification form. If you hold a current trades license anywhere, then you need to check yes and put that information in. Number 11 should not apply to any of you. If it does, I mean, read it if it does, but the odds are you are not going to be, number 11 should be no. That's if you had a tradesman license prior to July 1st, 1995. For tradesman applicants only, did you successfully complete an apprenticeship program in Virginia? Most of you guys, that should be yes. If yes, your registered apprenticeship partner may be a sponsor that has been granted an exemption to the examination. Again, my understanding is that the ACE program does not. DPOR will verify that status, provide the name of the sponsor. If anything changes where that works, then you'll be good to go there. If not, then you will need to take the exam. You need to provide a copy of the apprenticeship action form. So that's information that you'll get from Fairfax County Public Schools at the end of your apprenticeship. You can attach all the transcripts and information from your apprenticeship in here, and you'll be good to go. It's not totally necessary. This is not the most important thing if you plan on just taking the exam, but it helps. It makes your life easier. So if you successfully completed a apprenticeship program in another state, you want to do this information, but for most of you guys that won't be applicable. For 13, if you're a contractor that held a Class B before 91, you do that. Again, that's not most of you guys. And did you pass a contractor trade examination prior to 91? Again, that should be no for most of you guys. Okay. Which one of the following requirements have you met in order to qualify for a journeyman exam tradesman license? So for journeyman applicants only, you have a few options here. You can have 4 years of experience in the trade and 240 hours of formal vocational training. So if you had 4 years of trades experience and 4 years of school, you're in 4th year right now, so hopefully you've passed all 4 years, then you qualify for your exam. You're good to go. If you have not been working that whole time, you will have to wait until you have 4 years of experience. There is nothing that can take place of those minimum 4 years experience. There's nothing that is going to exempt you from that unless you have an associate's degree from a college. Okay? So unless you went to Nova to get your associates in this trade, then you have to have at least 4 years experience. Period. You can. It doesn't matter how many years of school you have to have at least 4 years of experience. If you have 5 years of experience, you only need 160 hours of training. If you have 6 years of experience, you need 80 hours of training. If you have 7 or more years of experience, you only need 40 hours of training. And those are your basic 4 options for a journeyman. Again, if you have an associate's or a bachelor's, you can have 2 years or 1 year of experience in the trade. But for most of you guys, that is not going to be what you have. You are going to have 4 years or one of these other ones. Okay, so you need to check one of those boxes on which you have. Again, for most of you guys, that should be that 4 years of experience. Now, for master applicants, see, the other one they allow for is 10 years of experience, but if you check here, all right, under journeyman applicants and 10 years of experience, you are a rube. Okay, there's absolutely no reason to take your journeymans if you have 10 years of experience. You want to go master applicants only and check 10 years of experience here, because you can go straight for your master's exam, skip your journeyman, and get it over with. However, if you get your journeymans and you hold it for a year, you get 1 more year of practical experience, provide your journeyman license number, and then you can take your master's. So that's how you go to get your master's. The only other way to get your master's is to get your license in another state and then apply for reciprocity. Again, that won't be most of you, but that is the other way to do it. So those are your 3 methods for getting a master's, and that's basically your 4 methods for getting your journeyman's. If you have been subject to any disciplinary action by any state, including Virginia, you have to do the disciplinary action reporting form. So that is if you lost a license for some reason in another state. Say you had your master's license but got caught doing a job without a contractor license or something, and they provided a disciplinary action. You have to report that and provide information. The information you need is in that form. It's the form plus a letter stating why you think it's not applicable or something like that. Very few people are going to have that issue. If you do and you're having trouble with this, I would recommend you call DPOR, but you will need to report any disciplinary action you've had from the state of Virginia. If you have been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor, you will have to do the criminal conviction reporting form. You'll want to fill that out, and you will also want to get a criminal history report from the Virginia State Police. That takes a couple weeks to get, so if you've got to do that, you will want to give yourself a couple extra weeks, or go ahead and get a copy of that as soon as possible so that you can provide it with your license application. Again, if you have any misdemeanors or felonies, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. I wouldn't worry about it, but you do need to get that that history from the Virginia State Police. And then I think if it's in another state, you need to provide history from that state, from their respective state police, or however that state works. But if it was in Virginia, you'll want to report that. So you need to provide information on that, and they may want some backup. So just understand that. And then besides that, you just provide your signature and you're good to go. They do tell you to make sure you understand that you cannot provide any false information. You'll notify the board if anything changes. You authorize the department to verify the information, and you authorize a background check. You also have to say that you read and understand Title 54.1, Chapter 11 of the Code of Virginia and the Virginia Board for Contractors Regulations, which is what we'll talk about when we get to that. That is the tradesman regulations that I showed you. You need to print out and look at. Besides that, you need to do an individual experience form. So you need one experience verification form per experience. So Section A is to be completed by the applicant. Section B is to be completed by one of the individuals listed below who will verify the applicant's work experience. So a building official, a building inspector, a licensed contractor. So hopefully for most of you guys, your boss, your employer, right? Or a licensed tradesman, a licensed architect, a licensed professional engineer, or other. There's not many others I can think of that'll work, okay? These are the people you want. The odds of you being able to get anything besides a licensed tradesman or contractor are pretty small. So those are the most important ones. You want a contractor or tradesman, and if you happen to know any officials or building inspectors, architects, or engineers that have any information about your qualifications in the trade, you can use those. But you need a licensed contractor or tradesman to fill out this form for you, and the section B of this form for you, and you'll need to do that for enough people to verify at least 4 years of experience. So you need enough people to fill out forms saying they know they've known you for a time frame, and all those time frames have to add up to 4 years. So that can be one person that you've worked under for 4 years. That can be two different companies you've worked for 2 years each, or 3 years at one and 1 year at the other. It doesn't matter. But you have to have people who worked with you or know about your work for a period of 4 years and can verify that you are qualified to take this exam. They're basically giving you a letter of recommendation. Think about it like that. It's a letter of recommendation that you should be qualified for your exam, and they have to have viewed your work for a total of 4 years, all the parties added up. So you put in your name, put in one of those control numbers again, either Social Security or your DMV number, mailing address, contact numbers, dates of experience. So, whatever length this is. So if if there was a guy new that you worked from March of 2018 to January of 2022, you'd put in those dates, and then they'll fill out the information based on that. And then you have, if it was for an employer, or really at all, you need to verify within that time frame if you were working full-time or part-time. If it was part-time, how many hours a week, or if it was seasonal, give a brief explanation of your work. But you need to fill that in. And then you need to describe in detail your daily activities as they related to your trade designation. What you want to do is trump this up as much as you can without lying. You want to detail your daily activities as well as possible to show that you have a well-rounded experience in the trade. So you don't want to just put installed HVAC systems, installed residential HVAC systems. You want to put like experience in or brazed copper lines, tested refrigerant lines, properly vacuumed and tested refrigerant lines, probably something like that. Installed duct systems, things of that nature. Properly charging systems, checking charge on systems, working on residential systems, commercial, industrial, working on chillers, doing piping fabrication for boiler systems. Whatever you can think of, try and break it down into as many components as you can on individual parts of the trade and put that in there. Troubleshooting residential HVAC systems, troubleshooting commercial rooftop units, so on and so forth. As many things as you can put in there without actually lying, so that it looks like you have a good, well-rounded idea of the trade. It's what you've worked on, the type of buildings you worked on, and things of that nature. So that's what you want to do. Describe in detail your daily activities, the things you do on a daily basis where you worked at related to this particular experience. And then you should list any trade-related certifications. So anything that you have that's a certification. So if you have a NATE certification, you want to put that in there. Your refrigerant certification, you want to put that in there. If you've got any certifications for VRF systems or variable speed systems from a particular manufacturer, or whatever the case may be, any trade-related certifications. Again, you want to put as much stuff in here to make you look as qualified as possible. The more qualified you look, the less likely they are to call you, ask questions, or provide additional information. You want to deluge them with relevant information as much as possible to make you look like a very qualified candidate. If you fail to do that, they will ask for additional information and the process will take longer. Okay, so the better you do filling this out and providing the information, the better you will time you will have getting this done. All right, and then the verifier has to put this information in there. The verifier has to put their name, job title, email address, contact number, mailing address, indicating what they are based on what you checked on the first page, and then they need to, in their own words, describe the work duties experience you had. So again, you want to fill this out to the best of your ability without lying, so that the person verifying it can write something similar here without lying, right? So you'll want to attest to the things that they did. You'll need them to attest to the things that you did on a daily basis during your duties, and what they can verify they've seen you do and what they know you know how to do. Okay, and then they'll need to re-provide the dates. Hopefully their dates match your dates, and then they'll assign saying they aren't lying. So those are the 2 forms you're going to need, and that's all the information you're going to need to take your exam. What I would attach to this is, again, your license, your school transcripts, everything that Fairfax gives you concerning completing the apprenticeship, and then I would attach any certifications you had. I needed to attach my GED. Don't they have that in there? They needed diploma or GED, I think. I thought they did. Maybe they dropped that requirement. Maybe they did. Maybe they dropped that requirement, but I provided my GED. Provide your any information that makes it look like you know what you're doing. You can provide copies of your individual certifications. I would recommend that you have these people that are verifying your experience write out a letter talking about your experience in the trade, and basically writing an actual letter of recommendation to attach to your individual experience forms, and just overall provide as much things as possible to make it look like you're qualified to take the exam.